My name is Peter Burke. I'm English. I'm a historian. I am a retired professor of cultural history from the University of Cambridge. My speciality is especially the history of Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries, cultural history, social history. But I also have an interest in the history of history itself, historical thought, historical writing, but also everybody's attitudes to the past and how these attitudes have changed over time. So including this question of what is historical memory. Okay, so what's historical memory and how is it different from individual memory? I would say the phrase historical memory, it's rather like social memory or cultural memory. It's a vivid metaphor. It's illuminating, also dangerous. We mustn't take it literally. That is, there's no collective brain or with a memory in it in the way that an individual has a memory that's part of his or her brain. So what's collective? What's collective is the practice of commemorating. And this is a very common practice in many cultures. And the practice of commemorating the past changes the way in which individuals remember the past. So there's this contrast, but there's also this connection between the individual level and the collective, historical, cultural, social level. There are many traumas with which different societies have to deal with. And I believe that there's a whole range of different possible reactions. So one reaction of a society or of individuals faced with the traumatic experience that they have lived through is to try to forget it. And this was the case with Germans after 1945, who didn't want to remember that the Holocaust occurred. But then for the Jews, it was the opposite reaction. They wanted to remember so that this could never happen again. They wanted the world to remember so that it couldn't happen again. And then the emotional tonality is different, because sometimes people remember because they want revenge. But there are times when groups and individuals want to remember, but in order to reconcile, as with this Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa recently, bringing the past back to life, but so that it rests in peace rather than causes more trouble. I'm quite sure that European interest in memory still exists, but I would want to go still further, because I think that this European concern with historical memory is much stronger now than it was 30 years ago. So this is an interesting phenomenon which we have to explain. We can't just say, Europe, it's a collection of old countries, there's a lot of past, it's natural for people to remember it. But no, we have to explain why so many people, the majority of the population now, are so interested in visiting museums or attending commemorations, even the reenactments of past events. In England, there's a society of people who meet once a year to fight the battles of the Civil War in the 17th century. They dress up in the costume and they fight the battle again. They never did this 30 years ago or 60 years ago, but it's important for them to do it now. If it is the case that people are more and more accumulating images of their past on Facebook or talking about their past in blogs, of course this has got something to do with the relative ease of doing this thanks to new technology. And it's true too that this is a continuation of older practices like family photograph albums. It's just that they're being shared with far more people thanks to modern technology, rather than you just have the visitors come to the house and you open the book and you show the photographs. But still, I take it that you think there is a link between these practices and historical memory. And I would say once again, I would see these practices, the increasing popularity of these practices, as a reaction to the speed of social and cultural change. So the people, they only look back at photographs from 10 years ago, and it starts to look like a different world. We were using telephones with a landline then. The world has changed so much. So once again, it's this attempt to maintain human contacts, individual contacts with the past. I do see a contrast between the attitude to the past in the old world and the new world, though I think we mustn't exaggerate it. I think that the Brazilian attitude, the idea of being oriented to more to the future, this is something Brazil has in common with Spanish-American countries and with the United States, and that it's not so strong in Europe. And I was very much struck the first time I came to Brazil, came to São Paulo, and noticed how few buildings from the past had been allowed to stay standing. The desire to destroy and rebuild and make the city new that you don't see so much in the old world. But in spite of all that, I think that Brazil and the United States are moving in the same direction as Europe, even if more slowly. I think there's more interest in the preservation of historical monuments in Brazil now than there was 30 years ago. So the gap between the old world and the new is diminishing. Yeah, I take the point that Brazil is a country where the proportion of young people is much higher than is the case anywhere in Europe. And I accept the point that generally younger people are more impatient with the past, that they see the past more as a burden they want to escape from. But I would argue that as social change accelerates, when these young people have reached just the age of 30, they don't have to reach the age of 50 or 60, they're already feeling cut off from their own past, their own childhood. They're already beginning to feel a kind of nostalgia. So I think this is one reason why the new world and the old world are coming together and there's more and more interest in recuperating the past, or at very least maintaining our human links with the past. It's become a psychological need for all of us, I think. Professores e professores, obrigado pela atenção. Espero de fazer tudo isso outra vez.